Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John. How are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing okay. Sam, you know that I've been making a lot of economic presentations recently towards the end of the year, particularly in a year when everything's all topsy-turvy. People want to hear the guy with the white hair tell them everything's going to be okay, and I wish that were the message. The message is decidedly a bit more cloudy than that. However, there is one thing that I tell them. Inflation's going down. However, Sam, there's a caveat with that. While inflation might be going down, prices aren't.
And that's the almost complete opposite of what people seem to want.
Yeah.
You know, if you ask anybody if you were doing a poll on inflation, which doesn't sound like a super fun poll to
No,
take.
it sounds like a boring poll.
But, and we have it. All this data, people are saying, prices are still too high.
Yeah.
Prices can be too high and not be going up, and that means there's no inflation.
That's right.
But that means prices are still too high, at least in people's minds. And I think that's really where we start to get to the root of the issue, is that, I talked with you about this before we started, is that it almost starts to seem more like a psychological issue than necessarily an inflation issue.
Well, I think you're probably right about that because there was such a large bump. And while the government said, I think the worst 12-month consumer price index was 9.1%, it certainly felt worse than that at times. It seemed like prices were going up far more drastically than that, particularly at the grocery store, and also particularly for items that you want as opposed to items that you have to have. It's like premium brands at the grocery store seem to be jumping up quite a bit, and noticed a little bit of shrinkflation as well. I know that I've told you that time I made the chicken salad and I went out to get some Duke's mayonnaise because it's the best. It has twang. That's their marketing slogan. And a 30-ounce quart. Okay, remember that 30-ounce quart. Quart is ordinarily 32 ounces. 30-ounce quart had jumped up in price. I was just like, I'm not paying that, so I got a different brand of mayonnaise. And it wasn't anywhere near as good, so I'm back to buying the Dukes, and I'm just going to have to accept that higher price. I don't like it. I'll still complain about higher prices, but at the same time, at some point, I'm just going to have to come to grips with the fact this is just the way it is. If I'm willing to buy Duke's mayonnaise at $7.99 for a 30-ounce quart, there's no reason why the public supermarket, no reason why Duke's has to sell their product for less just because.
Right, and the first reason this kind of idea and topic really came to my mind was people were asking me about mortgage rates, and while that's not necessarily prices, I think
it's not mayonnaise either.
It's not mayonnaise either, but they were starting to say, when is this going to become normal, or when are prices going to come down, or rates going to come down? And well, this kind of is.
Did you just answer it as yes?
Sure. I don't think that's what they were looking for, but no. I said it's all based on what people's expectations were or what they can compare it to, and I don't know what the appropriate time to compare it to. It still seems like people are saying, "Gosh, I could have gotten 2.75% on my mortgage a couple years ago, and now it's 8%. But say they were 8% for a couple years, dropped to 7. 7 may start to not seem that bad because they've been 8 for a couple years. So that really begs my question is whether it's food that soared in prices and maybe isn't as much now, if at all, in some categories, or cars that shot up in prices and you can't get anything under 30,000, 40,000 almost anymore.
Well, I mean, you can, but it's
not
AM, FM radio.
Yeah, and then mortgages too. I get that's not really an inflation. It kind of is, but all these categories, how long do you think it takes for people to kind of reset their expectations? Because this consumer sentiment, people are cheering for lower prices, and that doesn't happen outside of something pretty bad happening.
Lower prices generally suggest maybe not necessarily healthy stuff.
Yeah.
Deflation is one thing. Disinflation is quite another. Deflation, when prices are outright falling, because businesses just have to clear the shelves. Disinflation is going up at a much more reduced level, and that's okay. That's all right. So when you see prices going down, you're either seeing supply. When you see prices going down, simply either supply is drastically increasing or demand is drastically decreasing.
Yeah.
No, supply is drastically increasing or demand is drastically decreasing. And in that situation, which one do you want it to be? I mean, do you want to have so much supply that we can't consume it all? and have prices go down, or demand's going to have to go down. So I mean, one of the two options.
It's not good, and I think I've shocked a few people saying this, that I'm more scared in a long run situation of deflation than I am inflation.
Yes.
It's a worse problem. There is less of a recipe to fix it. If inflation boomed for a decade, you could hike the economy into a collapse, and inflation would essentially go away. It'd be really painful, but there's a pretty easy recipe for it to go away.
Yeah.
There's not a recipe for deflation to go away. So I think when do you think people start to reset their expectations of what prices could be?
For when they quit complaining about higher prices?
Yes.
2025. That's what I think.
2025.
And thank you all so much for listening.
Yeah.
No, I'd say probably about 2025. We're just now really kind of getting a grumple gust now. People really getting upset about it. We saw that strong PCE number during the third quarter GDP report, 4% or something like that. You're still hearing people complain about it, but they haven't done much in terms of their expenditures. And so what we'll see probably over the next couple of quarters are people trying to figure out ways to cut unnecessary expenditures from the budget. I wrote about this in last week's Common Sense. You all might have already done it. You probably already have. We're finally getting around to it, switching from DirecTV to YouTube TV, taking a look and seeing what exactly are we buying here at Amazon. I mean, just get these Amazon charges that just somehow just kind of appear on the American Express. And you go, why am I paying for Masterpiece Theater? It comes on every Sunday, whether I like it or not, on PBS. Why am I paying for Paramount Plus? What is this? All this going on? It's those little things that you don't really notice terribly much, or at least people my age, maybe Gen X, maybe we're just old and crotchety and just don't pay attention to things. But things that you signed up for, or the free trial. The free trial, which all of a sudden you didn't cancel, and the next thing you know, and so Beth and I are going through that right now, figuring out ways. Okay, we're going to cut this here. We're going to cut this here. We're going to do this. We're going to completely turn off the water supply at our cabin up in the mountains. We're not even going to run the risk of a leak, or just little things like that to try to save a few farthings every now and again. And now we're taking a look at really primarily, after we've gone through some of that other stuff, taking a look at the gig economy, taking a look at the gig apps on our phone, and we have drastically cut our usage of gig apps. And that will likely continue for a while. And then when that finally happens, once we flush out the unnecessary expenditures, once we get used to the new budget, I think that's probably going to, for us, it's probably going to be a 3 to 4 quarter sort of type of adjustment period, and that's why I say 2025 is when people are going to finally go, okay, this is the new normal. All right, I don't like my mortgage at 7%, but it's obviously not going back down to 3 3/8 anytime soon.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, my wife really wants to move.
Yeah.
And so you're just going to figure it out.
See, I've already gotten there. I think my answer is we across the board start to see it some next year. Several reasons. I think people in the investment industry and economists get too caught up in these averages, real wage averages are starting to pick up. But I do think we are starting to see, on average, wages pick up and real wages pick up a little bit. So again, I don't think it's overnight with, prices stopping increasing, people saying, oh, well, they're not going down. And I don't think it's, oh, well, I'm starting to make a little bit more money compared to where prices are going up.
Well, I mean, I tell you, I think you might be right on that. I mean, for some people, I think I'm going to stick with my guess at 2025 for the reasons I mentioned. I will tell you the reason why I might not be as positive as you are on this subject is just little things like grocery shopping for us. And going the other night, I picked up some chicken. I mean, nothing. Bottle of wine for Beth. I mean, just nothing. I mean, just standard dinner. A couple of potatoes, and all of a sudden I look at the bill, it's like $50, and I walk out of there with like one bag of food.
Can't even make a full meal out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like one of those deals. Like it wasn't like I was in there buying caviar. I wasn't buying filet mignon. I was buying chicken or something.
Yeah.
I mean, just next to nothing. And that still seems like a lot. It doesn't seem like that long ago I could have bought that meal with the bottle of wine, maybe $30 or something like that. And so that sort of shock is still kind of fresh with me. And if it's fresh with me, it's probably fresh with a lot of people my age.
Yeah.
I mean, Gen Xers going, when I was a kid, a long time ago, a $20
Stanley nickel.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we got to tell you a story in just a second, but I mean, you could $20. You got 2 big bags of groceries to carry in.
Yeah.
I remember my sister and I were walking into a grocery store that's no longer around in Mountain Brook Village. Brooke found a quarter. We went inside, got a candy bar and light, 5 pieces of gum. Yeah, I mean a normal size candy, that sort of type thing. So now, 25 cents doesn't buy you anything. I mean, obviously that's been a long time ago, but even so, it's really accelerated over the last several years. And the numbers that the government was feeding us in terms of some of the things that we wanted to buy were baloney. I mean, the prices went up much, much more than what they were saying, and we all knew it. So that's the reason why part of us is still upset about it, going, I didn't believe them then, and I don't believe them now.
I have one other reason why I think it may be sooner, and it's not an economist answer. It's more of a psychological thing. I think humans are so short-sighted and almost have memory loss. People. The running joke is now if you get in trouble with something in the media, you just ignore it, and the cycle will change in a couple weeks, and you'll get through it. I think people are just going to get, yes, I used to go to Trader Joe's once a week and I spent this much, and it feels like it's almost double now. But it's felt like that for over a year now. I've given up on going there and getting the same things we get every week and spending what I used to spend.
Are you buying less stuff?
Probably not. Maybe, maybe...
Because we kind of are.
Yeah, maybe being a little more efficient in some things I don't necessarily need. But, it's gone up. We have to eat. We get the things that we need to eat. And it just, at this point, I almost feel like it is what it is. Like, this is, it sucks. We used to spend this much. We're spending this much a week now. But it's been that way for a year. Doesn't, to me, really feel like it's going up much more.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you more cognizant of the BOGO now when you're in the grocery store?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's still ways. Yes, there's still ways that, we're trying to cut back in certain areas and just be more efficient.
And on Tuesdays, where do you buy your protein?
I don't go to Fresh Market anymore.
Oh, what happened?
I'm a Sam's Club and Costco guy.
Okay, I got to say.
Yeah.
All right.
But like I said, as far as sentiment goes, to me, I'm at the stage now that it just kind of is what it is. I can't keep leaving the grocery store every Sunday and saying, I can't believe we paid that much. Once it's been that price for a year, you kind of can believe it is. Well, it is that much.
I hear you. I still think there's just going to still be a little bit of an adjustment factor because I don't think the prices are going to stagnate. I do think the government's probably going to lie to us a little bit about where they actually are. It's the old replacement basket of the CPI. I don't think Duke's is going to go from $7.99 or wherever it is now, I forget what it is, to $8.99 or anything like that, but it'll tick up a little things. I mean, just enough to where, just get a little bit frustrated with it, and that $50 dinner is now $55. It'll be a little bit slower than it was, but I think it will take a little time to when people have made enough savings in the rest of their budget that they can adapt.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I say that. And that's the reason why we're cutting things down a little bit. The $13 bottle of white wine, I buy cheap stuff for Beth because I don't drink that stuff. That's now $15.99. Just all that type of things. So let's cut some other stuff out here. Let's figure out, why am I paying for Masterpiece Theater? Why am I paying for Paramount Plus?
It's a small thing.
Yeah, I mean, just little things, little $7 a month, all that type of thing. And then I got to tell you, we haven't Ubered in a while, and not used DoorDash. But I mean, why do you Uber someplace? So you can have that extra drink at dinner, right? I'll tell you what. Why don't I just not have that extra drink at dinner?
Save the money on the drink and the Uber.
Listen, I mean, tell me about it. I mean, last time I would have used an Uber, we were having dinner in Vestavia. And it seems like whenever I order an Uber, it's always we're reaching peak, all that stuff. So it would have been like a $30, $28 sort of Uber ride over to the restaurant from my house, throwing a tip to the driver, let's say $33 to $35 each way. And by the way, I get the extra drink at the place. It's going to be $10. I just saved myself $80.
Yeah.
All because I didn't want to have an extra cocktail. I mean, that type of thing adds up. Time. And believe it or not, and that's the way we're going to start cutting some unnecessary expenditures out of it. And then once we get used to that, maybe the higher grocery bill doesn't feel quite as heavy as it has been feeling.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why I say that. Now, in terms of mortgages, I told people it's going to be I told people over at that real estate brokerage here in town, we've already probably seen the worst of the existing home sales. which is less than $4 million annualized. Regardless of where mortgage rates are going to be, I think people are probably just going to say, hey, it is what it is. And I don't think mortgage rates are going to get much higher than 8% if they do at all. I've talked here on this podcast, so I feel the Fed is going to be forced to do some YCC, yield curve control. And I think mortgage rates will get back down to 7%, particularly once the Fed starts cutting the overnight lending target. And really, I'm kind of surprised they're not lower than they are now. I mean, mortgage brokers' true cost of funds are not, not 5.25 or what have you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of those deals of like going, so you want to make no spread or some spread?
Yeah.
And so right now, it seems as though they're willing to make no spread as opposed to some spread. So I imagine that mortgage rates will start coming down once people that make mortgages for a living are going, I'm not going to make my 3.5 NIM any longer.
Yeah.
Net interest margin. I'm not going to make that any longer.
Yeah.
I'm okay making 2 3/4 or something like that. You're going to start seeing that.
I think if you ask people as a whole, if you said we can give you a 7% mortgage, a year ago or whenever they first started getting 8%, they'd say, that's still not great. They were just at 2.75%, 3%.
6 months from now, people will go, hey, that's okay.
If you
They'll
start
crunch the numbers, and I go, all right, they're asking $750 for that house at 7%. We'll need to ask them for $710. And guess what happens?
Yeah.
You get the house,
Yeah.
more than likely.
Yeah.
So
And
I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. I think the housing market will be much improved next year due to the fact that I think mortgage rates should come down regardless of what happens on the back end of the yield curve, assuming, of course, if I'm wrong about yield curve control and the 10-year goes to 10%, all bets are off on what I just said. But if it does happen the way that I see them being played out, a 7% mortgage middle to end of next year is very reasonable, very, very reasonable to see, and maybe even 6% heading into 2025.
Yeah, I think again, just a guess, you could even see a little bit of a 6 handle, and I think at that point, after seeing 8s and 8s and 8s and 7s and 8s,
6 doesn't seem so bad.
A 6 handle starts to seem pretty good.
Doesn't seem too bad. All of a sudden, you start doing the numbers, the math starts to work a little bit better. So I think you're a little bit ahead of where I am. I think you're probably saying second, third quarter of next year.
Yeah.
You're probably third quarter. What am I hearing? Second or third quarter?
Probably summer. Late summer. Yeah.
Okay. July's technically third quarter.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Late second, early third.
Yeah.
I would leave it at that.
Right down the middle.
And I'm probably saying we got to get through the holiday shopping season next year, and then into 2025, and then I think folks will probably be a little bit more used to it. Should have a positively sloped yield curve at that time. Banks should be lending money out a little bit more normally, and things should feel a little bit more normal. Good Lord willing, and the creek doesn't rise, and we don't have a flock of black swans fly over our head or anything like that. But all told, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Speaking of that, while they weren't black swans, last time I was up in my cabin in Menton a couple of weeks ago, heard this huge commotion outside. First thing in the morning, black geese. I'm thinking to myself, they found me. They absolutely found me. All the black swans in the world are found me. They're landing right out in the cattle pond in my backyard.
It's pretty funny.
No, not
I grew up around a black swan.
What's that?
I grew up around a black swan in my
See,
backyard.
that's kind of creepy. What'd you do with it?
It was really mean, so you tried to stay away from it.
So wild fowl aside, Sam, kind of going back to what we were talking about. When do people get back to normal? Maybe your generation, maybe your family's been a little bit quicker to cut out some of the fat out of the budget. I think my generation probably is a little bit slower, probably doesn't understand things quite as much, truthfully. Probably didn't do the math on the DoorDash as quickly as we could have. I made that comment today at that presentation I made down in Montgomery this morning. I talked about, hey, I buy from Chen Express, it's $44. I buy from DoorDash or Grubhub or Uber Eats, that same bill is $69. I heard an audible gasp in the crowd.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, and I was probably about the median age in the room. So, so if I'm hearing that audible gasp when I do that, it's just, I'm assuming that a lot of people, hey, you're paying for convenience. You just don't know how much you're paying for that convenience.
Yeah.
And once people realize that, they'll cut that out.
Out of sight, out of mind, as long as it can be.
And so that's what I think is going to happen. Well, guys, we always love to hear from you all. So if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more or hearing more of what we have to say or what we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab, and find all kinds of exciting information, including links to previous podcasts, links to our blog Common Sense, as well as links to the various articles and the entire magazine itself, our third quarter 2023 Macro and Market Magazine. With that, Sam, I'm going to give you a last chance to say something about this topic.
That's all I got.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.